Endocrine System 1. Central Organs. Main questions of the lecture. Functions. Along with nervous system, endocrine system controls and coordinates all functions, organs and cells of the body. Endocrine organs and cells produce and release into the inner medium of the body, its blood, lymph, interstitial fluid, a biological active substances, hormones. On their chemical nature, they divided into two groups: amino acid derivatives, they are water soluble, the peptides, proteins, biogenic amines, and second group, cholesterol derived, lipid soluble, lipophilic, so lipid nature. They are steroids hormones like sex hormones or glucocorticoids. Hormones, as compared to neurotransmitter, act not locally in synapses, but spread by blood through the whole body. They act to the target cells only. The cells bear the specific receptors to hormones. Receptors are located on the cell surface, in the membrane, in the cell membrane, for the protein hormones, or in the cell nucleus for steroids. Mechanisms of hormones action. Initially, hormone connected this receptor, and as a result conformation changes in this receptor complex take place. Activated enzymes, and as a result the second messengers appeared, which change the metabolism of the cell and produce physiological effects. Cell may be activated or inhibited. Steroid hormones connected with chiral protein, and it move inside cell through the cell membrane and reach the receptor in the cell nucleus connected this steroid receptor, and as a result change the translations of genes and mRNA produced, and new proteins synthesized through ribosomes, and these proteins initiate changes in function of the cell, produce physiological effects. Classification of endocrine organs. Central endocrine organs: hypothalamus, hypophyses cerebri, the pineal gland. These organs I describe in this lecture. Peripheral endocrine organs: the thyroid glands, the parathyroid glands, the suprarenal glands, I will describe in the next lecture. Organs combining endocrine and exocrine functions, like reproductive organs, testes and ovaries. They produce sex cells and also produce sex hormones. Placenta, the organ which connect fetal and maternal body. and it also can produce hormones. Pancreas produces digestive juice, but at the same time pancreas contains islands of Langerhans, the diffuse part of endocrine system. Isolated hormone-producing cells belong to APUD cell system. These cells distributed in the epithelial lining of the organs of the digestive tract, respiratory organs, kidney, etc. Hypothalamus, the highest center of endocrine and autonomic nervous system. It controls and coordinates all visceral functions of the body. Hypothalamus located in the intermediate brain under the thalamus opticus. This is hypothalamus. It's part of the brain, visible at sagittal section of the human brain. Hypothalamus, if you will see from under point. This is hypothalamus and hypophyses. Hypothalamus contain a lot of nuclei, but we will concentrate it on 5 groups of neurosecretory cells or special secretory neurons. In the anterior hypothalamus there are 2 magnocellular nuclei, supraoptic and paraventricular, which produce hormone antidiuretic or vasopressin and oxytocine. In the middle hypothalamus there are 3 small secretory neurons nuclei, arcuate, ventromedial and dorsomedial. They produce releasing hormones or releasing factors, which may be liberins and statins. Liberins activate anterior lobe of hypophysis endocrine cells and statins inhibit. This picture demonstrates hypothalamus hypophysis cerebri at sagittal section. You can see hypothalamus, the third ventricle, medial eminence, and hypophysis cerebri. It contains 3 lobules, anterior, the biggest and darkest, middle, very small and narrow, this hypophyseal cleft between. This anterior and middle lobe together called adenohypophysis. And there is also the third lobule, posterior lobe, neurohypophyses. Hypophysis cerebri is parenchymal organ, consists of stroma and parenchyma. Stroma represented by connective tissue capsule round and connective tissue layer, and parenchyma represented by endocrine cells or special glial cells in neurohypophysis. You see here anterior, middle and posterior lobe. In anterior lobe there are 2 groups of cells, chromophobes, the light and pale stained They compose 60% of parenchymal epithelial cells of anterior lobe. And chromophils, which like dyes, compose 40% of cells. And they divided into two groups: acidophilic cells, they stained by acid dyes, and basophilic cells, they like basic dyes and stain usually in blue, and acidophilic in red. And there are also a lot of blood capillaries which connected with every endocrine cells. Specific staining of these cells belong to hormones. Basophilic adenocytes compose between 4 and 10% of all endocrine cells of adenohypophyses. They divided into two groups: gonadotropic cells, which produce gonadotropic hormones, follicular stimulating, and luteinizing hormone. The second type of cells, thyrotropic cells, they produce thyrotropic hormone, which stimulate the thyroid gland. Acidophilic adenocytes compose between 30 and 35% of endocrine cells. They divided into two groups: somatotropic, which produce somatotropin or growth hormone, which stimulate the growing of long bones, the growing of the body in the whole, stimulate the secretion of milk in mammary glands during lactation. There are also corticotropic cells. They're much bigger but stain pale, belong to chromophobic cells, and they produce very important adrenocorticotropic hormone, or ACTH shortly. Pars intermedia, very narrow, produce melanocyte stimulating hormone, and lipotropin, which stimulates the lipid metabolism. Which hormones, before release into the blood, accumulated between cells, and the follicle-like structures appeared. Posterior lobe contain no endocrine cells, no neurons. They contain a lot of pituitarides, special glial cells, like astrocytes. And there are also a lot of axons of large neurosecretory neurons of the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei. Posterior lobe does not produce any hormone. It also accumulate the hormones which produce in anterior hypothalamus and transported here through the axons of secretory neurons. And these axons produce synapses on the blood capillaries. They call axovasal synapses. And these axons have some varicose enlargements. They accumulated, they called herring bodies. Oxytocine and vasopressin from the anterior hypothalamus from supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei reach the blood capillaries of the neurohypophyses on their axons. And here hormones accumulated in herring bodies and release into the blood when it will be necessary. How the releasing hormones from the hypothalamus reach the adenohypophyses? So hypothalamo hypophyseal portal system, hypothalamo hypophyseal blood circulation. There is the median eminence, the extension of the middle hypothalamus. Anterior hypophyseal artery enter the hypothalamus, branching for blood capillary in median eminence of the hypothalamus. And these are axons of the small secretory neurons of the medium hypothalamus, which produce releasing hormones. They transported on the axons of these neurons and release into the blood through the axo-vasopressin synapses. Then blood containing the releasing hormones accumulated into several portals vein, which go into the anterior lobe where they branch in. Here hormone regulate the activity of the corresponding endocrine cells. They in turn release tropic hormones, which release into the blood and accumulated by hypophyseal vein, small neurosecretory neuron of the middle hypothalamus produce releasing hormones, neurohormones. They transported on their axons into median eminence, where they connected with blood capillaries, and the blood, these releasing factors collected by portal vein, which bring them into anterior lobe and then branching for capillaries. And here the releasing factors leave the bloodstream and reach the target cells in the anterior lobe. And here the neurohypophyses and long axons of large neurosecretory cells, supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei, which produce two hormones, vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone and oxytocine, which transported on the axons into the posterior lobal neurohypophyses and release into the blood through the axo-vasopressin synapses. So and then these hormones, tropic hormone, regulate the peripheral endocrine organs. This is the transhypophysis regulation of endocrine system by hypothalamus. And there is also parahypophyseal way through the autonomic nerve system, because hypothalamus is the highest center of autonomic nerve system. Sympathetic or parasympathetic nerve can reach peripheral endocrine organs and regulate their activity. This slide demonstrates in the whole the hypothalamo-hypophyseal regulation of the peripheral endocrine and non-endocrine organs. You see releasing hormones of the hypothalamus, tropic hormone of anterior lobe of hypophyses, and then produce several hormones, for example, somatotropic hormones which stimulate the growing of bones, AKTG, adrenocorticotropic hormone which stimulate the activity of adrenal cortex. Follicular stimulating hormone acts to, and luteinizing hormone stimulates the activity of testes and growing and maturation of follicles in ovary. Luteinizing and follicular stimulating hormone. Thyrotropic hormone stimulates the activity of thyroid gland. Lactotropic hormone or prolactin stimulates the secretion of milk in mammary gland, and oxytocine and vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone acts into the uterus smooth muscle and stimulates the contraction of the uterus during delivery, and antidiuretic hormone stimulates the absorption of the water in collecting tubules of the kidney. Pineal gland or glandula pineale or hypophysis cerebri located in the epithalamic region of the intermediate brain. Pineal gland is parenchymal organ, consists of stroma and parenchyma. Stroma represented by connective tissue capsule surrounding the organ and layers of loose connective tissue which divided epiphysis for lobules. Inside lobules you can see parenchymal cells containing glial cells and secretory neurons, pinealocytes. They activated during the night and inhibited during the day when a lot of light. Pineal glands produce more than 40 peptide hormones which regulate many functions of the body, as well as serotonin and its derivative melatonin. These hormones, melatonin especially, regulates the biological rhythms of the body, like menstrual cycle, day and night rhythms, circadian rhythms. The four pineal gland serve like biological clock.